Welcome to Cheaper Than Therapy, a podcast that journeys into conversations with the intention of demystifying, destigmatizing, and desensitizing what really gets talked about behind the closed doors of the therapy room.
I'm Vanessa Bennett.
And I'm Danae Selkin.
And we're seekers, soul sisters, and holders of sacred space. So join us as we dive into the ways that therapy can be connecting not only to yourself, but also to those around you.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Cheaper Than Therapy. We have one of our coaching rounds coming up for you. And today we had Jordan.
Yeah, Jordan, it's funny. It happens frequently, and yet I'm still, maybe surprised isn't the right word, I'm still taken aback, I suppose, when it does, that people sit on their computer with their words and their thoughts, and they write to us, a paragraph or two about what they're going through. And then when we get together and we start doing some of this like uncovering and digging in and asking questions, it almost always is something maybe a little bit different than what they even thought that it actually was that they were questioning and working through. So I think that happened again today.
But don't we always find that even like when people come to see us as clients, like the presenting issue quotes that they come in with is like, but actually like maybe there's some layers underneath that are actually the thing that you're sort of grappling with right now.
Right. And that's kind of the beauty of doing work with a therapist or coach, right? Is that person is able to, we're not in your world. So we're not hooked in and wrapped up with all the emotional hooks and, the way your brain is the hamsters on the wheel kind of thing. And so because we're able to stand back and not be in the tizzy with you, we can say, what about this? Or what it sounds like to me is this. Have you thought about this? And I think that can be really helpful. And also, by the way, even our family and our friends can't always do that for us because they're emotionally hooked too.
Yeah, I love the way you just described that, I think so often we talk about how we sort of like zoom out, and that is our job to sort of help like with that outside perspective to look at like what we're seeing as we look at it with a bird's eye view. And that, a lot of times the people in our lives are right in there with us. So it's really difficult for them to even support us in that way.
Yeah. So enjoy this one, guys. I think a lot of you guys will be able to relate to the, I thought it was this, but maybe it's this. So today we are talking to Jordan. And Jordan actually reached out because, so I'll give kind of the top line, Jordan, then you fill us in. So Jordan reached out because she recently started dating somebody who is separated from his ex, but is actually still living with the ex. And it sounds like you are kind of trying to sort through, are you going to be able to kind of work through this with him? How long is it going to be before he moves out? Like all of the what ifs, right? Like what is your guys' life going to be like if you guys stay together? That's kind of the gist that I got from what you wrote in, but I would love to have you kind of fill us in on like the details.
Yeah, so we kind of met like right when all this sort of like quarantine pandemic was going on. He's a friend, kind of like a guy friend in my sister's group of friends. And it was one of those connections that happened really quickly and moved forward very quickly. But he is going, like he's separated, emotionally and everything from the ex and was previously out of the house, but for legal reasons, he had to move back in. Okay. So right away, like I felt like he was very serious towards me, but my worry all along was I've been single for 3 years. So I've kind of had all those in between experiences that I feel we all kind of maybe not need to have, but maybe should have before entering into something serious again with someone. So I kind of, not that I wanted to give him an out. I hoped that he would want to kind of continue progressing with our relationship, but at the same time I worried that he didn't really have enough. He rebounded with another girl for 3 months, and then he kind of was with someone after that, and then very quickly we entered into what we are now. So it's just been kind of a weird experience for me also, because I never really considered being with someone who was divorced or going through a divorce. I always kind of thought I would experience all like what I would call like firsts with a person, and it'd all be fresh and new for us. But he's, you know, he spent $50,000 on a wedding, and you know, he had an affair, and it's a lot of elements to it, I guess, that I just was never expecting in who I would end up with after my previous relationship.
Jordan, can I ask you, just for context, how old are you?
30.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm hearing there's no kids in the situation with it. Okay. Got it.
Which is fortunate from my perspective.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like you guys are in the baby stages, right? And it sounds like there's a lot going on. And part of what I'm hearing is almost this, it's almost like grief. Like you're on this cusp of like, if I keep going down this path and this happens, I have to kind of grieve the fact that I won't have the firsts with him, right? They'll be first for you, and they'll be first with you,
right?
But not first for him.
And I have like tried to be communicative with him about that, and I brought up like, you know, that I feel, you know, I do. It is a kind of, I don't even know how to articulate how I'm feeling about it exactly, but he was like, oh, well, we'll still have our own firsts, you know, like our own time. We go, you know, on this vacation together or to this beach to have a glass of wine at sunset. So, you know, that did make me feel better about it, but I do worry because I do want to get married. I don't know what after, but I think I have a lot of qualms, I guess, in terms of, you know, with especially with his family. And he was very integrated with the exes, with his in-laws, you know, the siblings and everything as well.
Yeah. And so bring us a little bit into your thought process, Jordan, about like, you know, he's still living with his ex. Sounds like there's still like a lot of enmeshment in terms of like COVID. I'm sure they're spending a lot of time together. What's that been like for you?
So they haven't really been spending a lot of time. Like he pretty much stays at my place multiple nights a week. I think, you know, when he first found out, you know, that she was having an affair and all that stuff, like he kind of left in a big, you know, dramatic, like, I don't want to be around you obviously or be here. So when he moved back in, it's almost like he kind of has like a guest room in his own house, which is kind of weird. I've only been there, like he's very much tried to kind of keep me separate from that. He doesn't want me there when she's there. But I think it also, by nature of him not wanting to be at his house, it's caused our relationship to move forward perhaps a lot quicker than it maybe would have, because we're spending so many nights together. You know, like he'll oftentimes just like come directly over when he's finished with work. So it's been interesting.
Yeah. I feel compelled to, like, what's coming up for me is a curiosity around like where he is in the processing. Like, I feel like I hear a lot of wisdom in sort of you speaking to, you know, I've had 3 years of being single, and there's a lot that I've been able to process maybe about my previous relationships in that time and space.
Right.
How is he talking about like what he understands from this relationship ending, his part, you know, his 100%, and like what went on between the two of them? Like, how is he talking about that previous relationship to you?
I mean, I definitely don't have doubts about him being very, like, that chapter being closed for him. I don't think that, you know, he wants to get back together with her. I think he's definitely done. So, you know, I think more so a lot of it is, or are things that I need to work on to feel more comfortable, because he's been an open book about everything. You know, if I have any question about how the relationship was, I think they were together for 10 years, married for 3. And he admitted that he feels like he kind of almost forced the marriage a little bit on his end, because I think it just seemed like the natural next thing that you do with someone when you've been together that long. And he wanted kids. She kind of like, I guess, strung him along saying that, oh yeah, she wanted them as well. And, you know, it didn't really turn out that way. So I definitely trust in that he's moved on completely. But I think a lot of it is maybe, I can tell that he's mourning more so the loss of the family relationship he had with her side.
Mm-hmm.
He was very much integrated.
Well, so I guess I want to point out, or maybe put a pin in. I've heard you say a couple times, you know, it's more about me. It's more about me needing to figure this out. It's more like me needing to process this, or me needing to work through this. And so I want to actually kind of re-ask Danae's question in a different way, because I think this idea of being over somebody is one thing, but also might be different than how is it that he's talking about and speaking about the relationship, her as a person, you know, what is it that he's owning from the breakup, you know, and what went quote unquote wrong, which maybe didn't even go wrong, right? It just expired. It might have just been what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
I'm always curious, and I know probably Danae is too, how somebody is speaking about the situation, right? Not just like, I'm over it, but like, are they owning their part, right? Because there's always two people. It sounds like she was the one that, you know, had the affair, but there's always two people. Even when someone has an affair, the other person is still complicit in the situation, right?
Yes.
So that's, I think I'm curious about that as well.
Yeah, I think he definitely, you know, he's obviously angry about the legal aspect of the present tense, the divorce.
Right.
You know, she's fighting him for the house, the money thing. I don't think that he's really speaks about her in a super negative way. I think he has admitted that he's had faults, that, and even to the point where I think he does feel that what led her to cheat was some of his actions. He works a lot. He was you know, away. He literally works like 7 days a week. So I think her, you know, final straw was saying that he works too much, which I don't believe is the full picture, because I don't think that's a reason to get a divorce from someone. You know, I think something went wrong for them in it, and he admitted too that he kind of curled up into like a ball almost, and started drinking a lot, and kind of like a very avoidant behavior for a long time.
What comes up for me is that I think that divorced people actually can be some of the most incredible partners, because they've sort of, you know, done the work of committing to someone, walking through the fire of what it is to try to make a life with someone work, which is no easy feat. And then they know what it is to sort of have that experience of loss and sitting in that fire and that like pain. And so I think, you know, divorced people who've sort of really given themselves the time to process and do some inner work around like, what was that? And, you know, to Vanessa's point, a lot of times it is just this relationship has expired and we sort of understood what we needed to understand from each other. We've sort of taken away what we needed to learn from one another, and now it's time to move on. And that can be such a beautiful space of understanding. And when I'm sort of not there yet in that space of understanding, I do think it's important for me to do some of that inner searching, that seeking to understand, like, what was all of that, you know?
Yeah, the feeling of rejection too on his part, because I think another piece to it is that he still fought for the marriage even after knowing that she had the affair and everything, and she said, no, I'm done. Like he threw her like a surprise birthday party, and like, you know, I feel bad for him in a lot of ways, but I think it does speak to, you know, the fact that he is a very committed person. Doesn't give up easily.
And
even
so
if he's been wronged by someone.
Outside of the, you know, the firsts, which I totally hear you, because I myself am with somebody who was also married and divorced before me. You know, what are you afraid of?
Well, so my previous relationship was long distance for 3 years with someone who lived in Spain, and it was a very modern, I guess, relationship, you could say. Like, you know, we weren't really sure if we wanted to have kids. We loved to travel together. It's almost kind of like you know, like a freelance sort of lifestyle. And this guy is very, you know, he grew up, born and raised one town over from my hometown. He's very family oriented. He plans to take over a family business, so he's not going anywhere. This is where he's planted. So I guess the other big piece for me is that where I am right now is a temporary stepping stone to maybe move to California or, you know, go be somewhere else. I never really wanted to settle down where I grew up. And we haven't really articulated the whole children or not or thing, but I know, like, he has two older brothers that have, you know, 2 and 3 kids. Like, I know where he wants to, what direction he wants to head. And I don't feel so in my heart there yet.
Yeah. It feels like there's a lot of confliction going on. Like, you want to be in it, but you're afraid that maybe, you know, he's going to be, I don't want to say stable, because I that doesn't sound like the right word, but it's almost like, as somebody who also has like left the hometown and didn't want to stay and all the things, it's like there's like a stuckness that you get afraid, that you're afraid of kind of maybe having. And then, you know, I get that. It's like you wake up maybe 20 years from now and you're like, I didn't want to do this. Like, what did I do? Right. I wanted to go to California. I wanted to do this. I wanted to do that.
And I feel like it's so unfair to the other person as well to, you know, project yourself as one thing and then have the risk of that happening down the line.
Do you feel like you're doing that though? I mean, or do you feel like you've been pretty honest with him?
I have been pretty honest. I feel like he's like, he knows who I am, but I guess it's still very early stages. So I guess it's not something that we could, you know, we've only known each other for a little over 3 months.
I mean, yes and no, right? If you were 22, I might say, yeah, sure. But at 30, I don't know. My perspective on this idea of like, it's too early to have these conversations has really changed. I think as I've gotten older, as I've done more of this work. And I think that a lot of people now are changing their perspective on, you know, how long do you quote unquote play the game before you just get real and just be super honest about what do you want? What do you not know that you want or don't want? You know, what do you see your future looking like? What, you know, what are you afraid of? All of these conversations, because at the end of the day, you are only 3 months in, but it's good for you guys to know where the other person stands.
And I think even in sort of his exploration around like what were some of the takeaways in terms of patterns that I could be at risk of repeating, right? Like I heard you saying his ex, you know, sort of said that she didn't want kids and he sort of didn't hear that, you know, or didn't believe that. Or I think a lot of times people think, well, she says that now, but that may change for her. Is that sort of something that's happening again? You know, is he sort of wanting to settle down where he is, wants the family, and you sort of have a little bit of wanderlust, which nothing wrong with it, but we might want different things from our lives. And is he maybe not sort of being aware of like, ooh, I'm at risk of repeating a pattern here, sort of, you know, choosing someone who maybe doesn't want the same things that I do.
Yeah, I think that it probably is something that we would need to talk about. Like he's, you know, right away wanted me, like I've already met all of his family, his nieces, his nephews, which isn't an entirely comfortable scenario for me just because I didn't grow up in a family like that. You know, we didn't really, like my mom's side had no kids, my dad's estranged from his side of the family, so it's just, it's not kind of my natural element. And I guess where I'm at, and I should articulate to him, is that I just don't know. I don't know what I want in that regard. And I'm not sure if I've just been so resistant to even pondering that lifestyle because I feel, oh, well, that's not me. You know, I'm the free spirit, I'm the traveler, you know, like, but, you know, maybe it is something that I, you know, if I found the right person, that could be really wonderful, as long as they get that I'm also going to need to, you know, go on trips and you know, go trekking through the desert or whatever it might be.
Maintaining that wanderlust, right? Because you can have both. I mean, but you do need a partner that supports that side of you.
And I guess I'm wondering, Jordan, if there's a feeling of you know, the pace is a little bit fast for me right now, is if that's arising, because I think, you know, we can give ourselves time to sort of see how this feels. And if maybe as we get closer, I do feel like some of the stability feels right to me. I think Vanessa's a perfect example of how we can sort of feel one way. And then, you know, I don't know that you necessarily knew you wanted to be a mama and that very much like changed for her. Like, and I think that happens for some, like me too. Right. But, I think we can give ourselves time to sort of see, like, I don't know what's true for me right now, but there's really no rush in me knowing. So maybe we just sort of take a breath with where things are and we see. But how does that feel?
Right. I think I was telling my mom this the other day, like, because she was like, oh, you should break up with him until he's fully, you know, divorced and all this stuff. And I honestly, there's a strange comfort to me in him not being fully out of it, because I almost feel like it buys me time.
Right. You can't rush too quickly, right?
Right.
Like, well, you know, it kind of, I don't know. I think he's a very sincere and serious person, which is simultaneously what I love about him. It also freaks me out.
And is that okay? You know, because it almost sounds like a little bit of this is it sounds like normal, kind of what I would expect, things that are coming up for you, things that you're questioning. I'm not sure. They all sound, whatever normal means, right? I'm making air quotes, people who can't see me. They all sound normal to me. And it sounds like you're questioning a lot of your questioning. Like, I should know, shouldn't I know by now? Should I, you know, it's one of those. And so I almost would challenge you and ask the question, like, can it be okay to be in a state of not knowing? Can it be okay to be in a state of questioning? You know, do we need to rush so quickly, or to try to rush ourselves so quickly into a place of, I need to have this figured out?
Right. I think when I was living abroad, I was very much in a group of, you know, expatriates that were like very much in line with my mentality. That was, I didn't have to be on any firm timeline. You know, it felt so like there was such a liberation in that. And now being back, you know, living fairly close to where I grew up, it's everyone around me is on that, you know, path that you grew up thinking you should be taking, which has been just a little bit stressful for me, because I never really, I was always kind of, no, I'm my own person and I'm gonna do things in my own way, and you know, who cares about all that, you know.
So I don't want to interrupt you, but what's coming up for me right now is maybe then this is actually less about him and his circumstance and his situation. I could be wrong, but maybe it's actually more about you and the identity shift and the identity change that's happening right now, and the being scared of what that might look like, right? And so sometimes if we're working through a lot of this identity questioning, we might hold on to things about the other person that we could use if we needed to hit the eject button. And so, because I've done it myself. And so it's like, well, but you know, if it ends, it could end because, you know, he's still married and he's still connected to his, and I'm not saying those things are important, right? And they're not bringing things up for you, because of course they are. But based on what you said about him being really kind and really, you know, forthcoming and all of these things that you really love about him as a person, I wonder if that stuff could be sorted. And is it more about your fear around, what does this mean? Like, if I had to actually end up staying with this person, what does it say about me? What does this mean about me? You know, am I all of a sudden changing my path? Am I all of a sudden on the same path as all these people that I grew up with? Am I all of a sudden saying that my life isn't going to be abroad and spontaneous anymore? And yeah, there's a huge, now, no, that doesn't have to be the case, right? But I understand the questioning and the fear around it. Probably more than I can articulate.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like the fear of, like, for me, that it's the fear of mediocrity, right? For me, just settling down in my hometown and getting married and having kids, like, I know, I'm sure that's a wonderful experience, but it's something I always very strongly rejected.
And I just like want to interject with, you're not wrong for that if that's how it feels, right? Like sometimes my questioning is my inner wisdom saying, do I sort of get to define my truth for myself, or is everyone around me sort of defining that? Because inevitably, like we're all going to be impacted by the pressure, the experience of what everyone else thinks is like the quote normal, like what you should be doing at this point in your life conversation, right? But can I sort of use this questioning that's coming up as an opportunity for me to say, maybe some of that is my inner wisdom telling me to slow down a little bit and really get clear about what feels true for me.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's also turning 30 too, like especially as a woman is such there's so much within that.
Absolutely.
Just sadly changes your perspective, and it's society's expectation, obviously, but
but there is biology in it, right? Like there is a reality that we have to, as women, you know, stay within. I mean, yeah.
And some of that not though too, right? Like some of that is the activation of those around us that, you know, like as someone who had a baby at 38, like the stuff started at 30 and like 8 years later I was like, yeah, I'm still having a baby, so pipe down. Like I think that
calm down.
Everybody can also get activated by, oh, you're almost 30, what are you doing? And some of that is not necessarily my stuff, it's a little bit your stuff, right? But I think it's just about like, how can I get clear on like, what is my truth versus everybody else's truth?
Yeah.
And I do think that sometimes when these kind of relationships present themselves, what I've found helpful for myself, but also friends and clients, is to say to somebody, you know, kind of like what I said earlier, like, do you need to have it all figured out right now? Or can you, to Danae's point, take it slow, be expressive with him about the fears that are coming up, right? Because you can't communicate too much. There's no such thing really. But can you almost use this relationship as an opportunity to do some of this exploring, right? To allow it to kind of crack you open and to make you question things that maybe you've never questioned before, and to bring you to deeper places that you maybe have never wanted to look at before, right? And allow it to be a catalyst for you, regardless of what the outcome of the relationship is, right? Because people come into our lives for this exact reason, right? It's not about where we're going to be with that person in 10 years. I mean, of course we're going to get wrapped up in that, you know, it's important to us, but it really is like, in this moment, what is this relationship here to teach me? And then allow it to manifest, allow it to kind of, you know, grow and kind of evolve from there, from that place, rather than evolve from this projection that you've already got around the future of what it could be. Does that make sense?
Definitely. Yeah. It's hard to live in the present, I think, of any new relationship.
Yeah, that's so true. It is really hard work to continue to bring myself back to where my feet are right now, what's actually happening between the two of us right now, to V's point, and sort of, yeah, that future tripping that we can all get into. But how is this right now between us? Can we stay here?
Yeah. And I mean, being in a long distance relationship for 3 years, you know, I didn't really have to think about those things.
Yeah.
Like it's much different, you know, hanging out with someone multiple days a week. With him, we lived in stretches of, you know, it'd sometimes be 3 months before I would next see him.
And look, and as far as like, you know, this giving you the opportunity to dig into the layers in yourself, in my experience, again, working with people, but also personally, you do have to have a certain level of avoidant tendencies to be able to have a really long-term, long-distance relationship. Not saying that it's like necessarily bad, right? But you do have to be able to embody a little bit of that. Otherwise, you can't hang with it because it's way too activating.
Out of it. Yeah, I never thought of it that way. And now I'm like, whoa, like there was something inherently extremely comforting in not having to deal with a lot of
understand
deal with like the mundane, you know, parts of a relationship with someone, because everything was all packed into a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks of seeing him.
Honeymoon.
So every moment was exciting.
Yep. And so that's also another layer to this, right? Like this is a totally different experience that's going to give you another perspective on a layer of yourself that you haven't actually had to sit with and get like uncomfortable around, right? So there's learning in that too, you know? And I don't want to say it's like people are guinea pigs, but in a sense, that's what relationships are. And so use it for the testing ground that it is and allow it to unfold as it will unfold. In the meantime, you both are hopefully growing and learning more about yourselves and peeling back layers. You know, obviously you're only responsible for yours, but you could be that same catalyst for him too, you know? Yeah. Well, it's a big one. I know look, from what I'm saying or hearing or whatever, I'm more about identity stuff. And that's kind of like the biggest of the big for many of us. And so, you know, keep us posted as this kind of rolls out and manifests itself. And I'd be curious to know kind of where where your work takes you.
Yeah. I think it's cool that you are with someone right now who is in a space of sort of, to your point, like it's nice because he has this opportunity to really go inward and do inner work, and you can sort of be in partnership with him doing that right alongside him, right? Like we can both sort of notice like what is coming up for us, to V's point, like in terms of our identity right now, because a lot of it is shifting. A lot of it is like really coming to the surface in ways that maybe we haven't had to think about it before.
Yeah. And I think especially being in like times of COVID, being primarily when we got to know each other, it's the authenticity right up front, and the amount of time we spent together definitely defined the relationship right from the beginning.
Yeah, there's an intensity to it, right? Baked in, essentially. And maybe part of it for you is like pumping the brakes a little bit. Not that you have to like stop seeing him, but pumping the brakes and the intensity and just saying, hey, there's a lot coming up from me that I'm questioning, and which is good and scary. You know, and maybe we need to roll around in that a little bit. Well, Jordan, I appreciate you reaching out, and thank you for kind of sharing, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to be able, especially during COVID, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be able to kind of commiserate and feel you on this.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Take care.
Keep us posted, okay?
Well, thank you.
Be well. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Cheaper Than Therapy.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
And if you want to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram at Vanessa S. Bennett
and at Danae Logan Selkin.